There'll be darn little brain work to do.
Hollywood. A strange town. On one hand, glitz and glamour define this desert oasis. Wherever you go, you are surrounded by celebrity, wealth, the magic of the movies, and the promise of immortality. But there is another seedier side to this city of angels, one filled with poverty, injustice, and inequality. To many people, Los Angeles is a city where dreams go to die and the unlucky get lost on the fringes. And some may even disappear. In the first episode of Hollywood Parallel Universe, we will be covering the mysterious disappearance of an aspiring starlet in the golden age of Hollywood, whose dreams of fame were tragically cut short. On October 7th, 1949, Jean Spangler left home to pick up a child support payment on her way to a night shoot and never returned. What could have happened to this aspiring starlet who was on her way up? This is the mysterious disappearance of Jean Spangler. The 1940s was a revolutionary decade for the film industry. When the attack on Pearl Harbor in 1941 sent America to war, Hollywood responded by producing an increasing amount of morale films. With patriotism at a feverish height, legendary films like Casablanca and Miss Miniver were released. The 1940s was also the decade when Orson Welles released Citizen Kane, and Hitchcock was introduced to America with his film Rebecca. With all this excitement, it was hardly surprising that a young Jean Spangler would want to shoot her shot at Hollywood stardom. Born in Seattle in 1923, the vivacious Jean Spangler graduated from Franklin High School in Highland Park in 1941. Before she even tossed her graduation cap, she had her sights set on Hollywood. Following high school, Jean began working as a model in Los Angeles, while also dancing at places like the iconic Florentine Gardens in Hollywood and the Earl Carroll Theater. Jean was also known as a bit of a party girl, and was frequently spotted at the nightclubs and bars on the Sunset Strip. In 1942, she met and married plastics manufacturer Dexter Benson in a whirlwind, wartime love affair. Unfortunately, the marriage only lasted 6 months before Spangler filed for divorce, citing cruelty on Benson's part. But the divorce wouldn't be finalized until 1946, and it was in that time that Spangler and Benson had an on-again, off-again relationship that resulted in the birth of a baby girl, dotingly named Christine. With the impending divorce, a heated custody battle took place. Benson fought hard to keep Christine from Spangler, due to Spangler reportedly preferring parties to priorities. He reportedly denied Jean visitation on 23 separate occasions, and apparently threatened her by saying he'd fix it so you'll never get to see her. The judge eventually ruled that any questionable conduct of Spangler's was in the past, and that Christine belonged with her mother. With that, Jean brought Christine to move with her to a Park La Brea apartment where they shared a space with her mother, brother, and sister-in-law. And in case you were wondering, domesticity never dimmed Spangler's Hollywood dreams. In this time, she maintained her search for acting work in Hollywood and continued in her pursuit of stardom. By 1949, the war and post-war boom of Hollywood was now beginning a slow decline. There were more sinister things happening below LA's surface, a parallel universe, one could say. There was a spike in gang violence and senseless killings that rocked Los Angeles throughout the 40s and 50s. Organized crime ruled the Sunset Strip. Gangsta Mickey Cohen ran his extortion racket out of a clothing shop there. That's where I got these duds. And violent altercations between rival gangs occurred almost daily. Throughout the 1940s, there were multiple murders and disappearances of several women at such an alarming rate that the LA County Grand Jury even launched an investigation into why the police failed to solve any of these crimes. Most famously, an aspiring actress named Elizabeth Short was killed, mutilated, and left on the side of the road in Leimert Park. This case, known as the murder of the Black Dahlia, preceded the disappearance of Jean Spangler by 2 years, though it was still very much a part of the public's consciousness at the time of Jean's disappearance. It's no exaggeration to say that Los Angeles was a very dangerous place for a woman to be in the 1940s. In 1949, things were looking up for the 27-year-old Spangler. She began getting small roles in movies, including bit parts in When My Baby Smiles at Me and Wabash Avenue. Then, on October 7th, Jean left her daughter Christine with her sister-in-law, saying she was going to meet with Benner, who was late on a child support payment. Spangler also said that afterwards, she was going to work on a night shoot for a new movie and to wish her luck. She was jovial, excited. After that, Jean Spangler took off into the misty Los Angeles evening and was never seen or heard from again. 2 days later, Jean's sister-in-law phoned the LAPD to report Jean missing. Just 2 hours after that, Jean's purse was found in Ferndale by a worker at Griffith Park. The black purse was on the ground with one strap torn off. Strewn about were a pack of Lucky Strike cigarettes, a hairbrush, and some papers. However, most intriguingly, included in the items found in the purse was a note in Jean's handwriting that read, "Kirk, can't wait any longer. Going to see Dr. Scott. It will work best this way while Mother is away." Los Angeles Police Department Deputy City Chief Thad Brown was assigned as Chief Inspector of the case. Known for also heading the Black Dahlia murder in 1947, Brown set to work, forming a 60-man team to investigate Jean's disappearance. The condition of the purse, with its broken strap and items thrown about, indicated a possible struggle. Ferndale, the location where the purse was found, was also known as a dumping site for various LA killers, further raising the alarm. As the LAPD began searching for clues at the bars and nightclubs frequented by Spangler, public fervor for the case rose, with theories on Spangler's disappearance running rampant after the note was published. Overall, it was generally speculated that Spangler was a victim of a botched abortion by the mysterious Dr. Scott. But who was this supposed doctor? And more importantly, perhaps, who was Kirk? Was Kirk someone close to Jean? Was he her lover, perhaps? And was Dr. Scott a registered physician in the city of Los Angeles that the LAPD could potentially locate? Now this is where the case takes an interesting turn. While canvassing bars and restaurants on the Sunset Strip that party girl Jean supposedly went to, police learned of a mysterious figure known as Doc, an apparent former medical student who frequented the Sunset Strip and offered abortions for a fee. Police searched high and low for this person, but they could never find this doctor or confirm their existence. At the same time, Deputy Chief Thad Brown received an unusual direct call from none other than the legendary Hollywood actor, Kirk Douglas. Yes, that Kirk Douglas. Douglas called because he became concerned when he heard it was his name on Jean's note and wanted to dispel the rumors. Kirk Douglas called Brown while on vacation in Palm Springs and immediately told the deputy that he barely knew the young actress, though she may have been an extra on his latest film, Young Man with a Horn. This statement was then revised when, according to his lawyer, Kirk Douglas did, in fact, know the actress. He had kidded around with her a little on the set as he had done with numerous other extras. Douglas returned to LA from his vacation for questioning, though despite this unusually timed phone call, the LAPD never considered Douglas to be a primary suspect. It was at this time that the LAPD started looking deeper into Jean's personal life. Naturally, this led them to Dexter Benson, who, lest we forget, reportedly threatened Spangler's life at one point. Benson was also supposed to have seen Jean on the night of her disappearance, but upon questioning, Benson surprisingly denied ever having seen Jean on October 7th, as Jean's sister-in-law had stated. Benson's new wife even corroborated this. This statement tipped off police into checking whether or not Spangler even had a movie job that night. They quickly confirmed with various studios and even the Screen Extras Guild that there were no records of Jean having worked that evening. In addition, a witness who saw Spangler that night, a farmer's market saleswoman who worked near Spangler's home, reported seeing her that evening around 6 p.m. and said Spangler seemed to be waiting for someone. So who was Jean waiting for, goddammit? Leaning into public speculation, police now believed that Spangler had maybe lied about seeing Benson and having a movie job as a cover-up for what she was actually doing that night, getting an abortion. However, friends of Spangler told police that she was not pregnant at the time of her disappearance, all save for one, who confided in police that she actually was. This confusing mix of statements and assertions did not make the search for Jean any easier. Police began an inquiry into the Kirk figure that Jean mentioned in her note, assuming it was Jean's lover. Actor Robert Cummings told police that at a studio 2 weeks earlier, Jean walked past him whistling and in a good mood. When he inquired about her elated state, she responded by saying, "I am happy. I have a new romance." And when Cummings asked if the affair was serious, Spangler replied, "Not really, but I'm having the time of my life." If it was true that Jean did have a certain someone in her life, police had trouble tying her to anyone in recent years. There was one lover boy, however, that stood out in all this hoopla. His name was Scotty, an Army Corps lieutenant that Spangler reportedly had an affair with at some point during her marriage. Police learned that Scotty had beaten Spangler and threatened to kill her when she stopped seeing him in 1945, but never saw him again after the divorce. 1945 was 4 years ago at that point, so Scotty's involvement seemed unlikely. You could also say that Scotty just didn't know. Scotty aside, further twisting the plot of this story were the various witness statements that came out as a result of Jean's disappearance. One statement that especially complicated the case was that Spangler was reportedly seen in Palm Springs just a few days before she disappeared, in the company of Little Davy Ogle and Frank Nicolai, both henchmen of the mobster Mickey Cohen. At the time, Ogle and Nicolai were under indictment for conspiracy, and both disappeared around the same time that Spangler did. So, was Jean a witness to some nefarious mob activity that she shouldn't have seen? According to Jean's mother, Jean was not the type of girl to get mixed up with people like that, and by that, she meant the mob. The police also had it on good authority that Nicolai's body was thrown into a lime pit in a vineyard in Cucamonga before Jean disappeared, and Ogle's body was either already there as well, or was on its way. Which is a very specific bit of information that I'm not sure how the police would just happen upon. So let's recap for a moment. 27-year-old Jean Spangler goes missing on October 7, 1949. The only trace of her is her purse, which is found in a known dumping site for bodies. The persons of interest are Kirk Douglas, Dexter Benson, her ex-lover Scotty, Mickey Cohen's mob, an elusive abortion doc, and a supposed Kirk and Dr. Scott, neither of which were able to be located or were even confirmed to have existed. It's no wonder that the LAPD had trouble cracking this case. It certainly has nothing to do with a lack of funding, though, am I right? After Jean's disappearance, the police were inundated with sightings of her in El Paso, Phoenix, Mexico City, San Francisco, and many places in between. But Jean's mother Florence insisted that she would have communicated with us if she is alive and free, and nobody can tell me that she would have left her baby unless she was forced to do so. She loved her too much. With Jean's disappearance, custody of Christine was reverted back to Benson, who would later not allow visits from Florence. When he defied a court order that permitted Christine to see her grandmother, Benson left the state with his daughter and the two were never seen again. Throughout all of this, official and unofficial searches for Spangler continued in Los Angeles, where her photograph was circulated by police. However, as the years passed, the case grew cold. 71 years on, and there are still no leads in the disappearance of Jean Spangler. No suspects were ever arrested, and no evidence of foul play other than the torn bag were discovered. There was, however, an addition to the tale that would emerge 54 years later, one that would raise the question of a potential serial killer and a direct connection to the case of the Black Dahlia. In 2003, former LAPD homicide detective Steve Hodel wrote in his book, Black Dahlia Avenger, that he felt his father, Dr. George Hodel, was not only the culprit behind the unsolved Black Dahlia murder, but had something to do with Jean Spangler's disappearance as well. Now the evidence for this is compelling. In his lifetime, George Hodel was considered the primary suspect in several murders, including that of the Black Dahlia. In the 40s and 50s, Hodel was also known for providing illegal abortions to not only the rich and famous, but the girlfriends of LAPD officers as well, which might explain why he managed to fly under the radar for most of his life. Steve Hodel suggested that the Dr. Scott in Jean Spangler's note was potentially another member of his father's abortion ring, and that the Kirk in the note was a Dr. Eric Kirk, a physician that was arrested for performing abortions just days before Jean's disappearance. Did Jean's urgent need for a doctor lead her into the arms of the murderous Dr. George Hodel? Also important, the night of her disappearance, 2 witnesses reported seeing Jean at a restaurant on the Sunset Strip at about 2:30 a.m., accompanied by a clean-cut fellow in his 30s that matched Dr. George Hodel's description. Shortly after, Jean Spangler was also seen driving off with a man in a 1936 black Packard sedan, the same exact car that George Hodel drove. Much like the Dahlia murder, the evidence for this cannot be substantiated because Steve Hodel is unable to gain access to the property his father once lived in, or to the old police files. The hope is, one day he'll get the green light so he can dig it up and put both cases to rest. As of 2020, Jean Spangler remains on LAPD's missing persons list. The nature of her disappearance has made it difficult for the police to pinpoint exactly what happened to her on that night in 1949. Beneath the glitz and glamour of Hollywood lies a parallel universe, visible only if you look close. Like many others before and after her, the vivacious Jean Spangler sought Hollywood stardom and found herself lost somewhere in the in-between. There are many stories like Jean Spangler's, more fallen starlets, murderers, gangsters, and cons that make up the fabric of Hollywood. Glitz and grime go side by side in our Hollywood parallel universe. Tune in next time for more.